money do abishke king ad mino adash ko gay win the McQueen Skate gawin we win masi kina gawin we gawin kina masi kina ngil money do mino adash ngil squad skate ajin chikazo jig me all money do all when a bushu na binish ko gay no kumasan we win the skate win modern McQueen mindwa we just the sway man no kumasan skate Gawin and Guji, the in the comic, the in the car scene, oh, same, we can I be wedding you money do. Mean what does we winning a can again, Guinea, McQueen not being a school gamer. In Nadama goose young Nungoma in the Schnabbe, young Mino what does go gate and McQueen among some guys, mean a goose and a Schnabbe, and we winning in a Mamino saying. Na binish ko gay ma in mamo na kini ang way na dishi kamang ewa na shnabi mami zuin way ni dish kay ma baby shi gina nadama guzi ang way jiyang gina nadama guzi ang way jiyang ma da shi giwe ang da payo ang ma kina da payo ang minwa dash ma da giwe we do yang kina ma in a kinda mang nungo ma in maunji diyang shkimi dash ma way ni Begish sana ma again in adama goose young man giwe young and giwe we do young o nishnabi is it twawin mino at the school game again in a mino sink in igani minang. Me to go your minute my you came to matsa o doing me koma koi minute clean way to it. Scott, if I can, I'll just offer a brief translation. If you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to offer a brief translation that Mandamin Chief Executive.
1 minute, Bobby Tao. Bobby Tao, I think we've lost you for a second.
Yep, somebody muted me. I'll keep going. So Chief Executive Benjamin offered me tobacco today so that I could speak on our behalf. And Anishinaabe King here, what we do is we talk for our tobacco and we offer it to those powers that be that take good care of us and that support us in our life. And so what I did was my very best to send the tobacco out to those money due to take care of us and everything that we're doing here today, and that everything that we gain that we're able to take home and benefit our community. So me hate to go a minute. That's all I have for you. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Bobby Tao. Thank you very much for your kind words. Next, we'll have the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe's very own Red Willow Drum Group from East Lake, Minnesota. This is a well-blended drum group that comes from the following tribes: Red Lake, Mille Lacs Band, Leech Lake, and Standing Rock. I'd like to introduce to you Brandon Sargent Sr., Michael Jones, Anthony Killspotted, Frankie Popsadora, Courtney Hayes, and Aaron, or known as Vito, Bakanaga. And welcome my fellow Ogichidas, the Mille Lacs all-veteran group, Army veteran Jamie Short, and Army veteran Renee Pewash. By the way, on the day of filming, it was her birthday, so she's truly a dedicated Ogichida. The Mille Lacs all-veteran group will presenting the colors to the drums of Red Willow Drum Group, performing the grand entrance and opening song, which will then be followed by the flag song. And thank you to the Red Willow Drum Group and the Lax All Veteran Group. Now, before we hear our open remarks, I have a short story about the importance of sweetgrass, a leafy grass commonly found in the Midwest. This story is by Anishinaabe elder Wally Chartrand. He sets the perfect stage for the theme for our conference. We are all interconnected in everything we do, and we must take into consideration our past, the present, and our future. His reading, Sweetgrass, a kindness medicine, has a sweet, gentle aroma when we light it. We use 21 strands of sweetgrass to make a braid. The first 7 strands represent those generations behind us, our parents, our grandparents, and so on back for 7 generations. We are what we are is because of them. They have brushed and made the trails we have been walking up until now. The old people tell us that it takes longer for us to heal today. And the reason is because the old trails our ancestors used to find us have been destroyed. They have built dams, which have destroyed the old trails. They have built towns and cities where the old trails used to be. So now our ancestors are having a hard time trying to find us to help us heal. The next 7 strands represent the 7 sacred teachings: love, respect, honesty, courage, wisdom, truth, and humility. The old people tell us how simple, powerful the teachings, how powerful and beautiful the teachings are. Love, a very simple teaching. Respect, a powerful teaching. Humility, a beautiful teaching when we truly understand the teaching of humility, that I am not any better than anyone else, and you are not any better than me, and that at the end of the day, we are simply human beings. This is what makes this teaching powerful and beautiful. The only thing wrong with this teaching is that we don't walk them every day. Love is only a 4-lettered word. It's when we walk that love, when we show it, when we live it, that makes these teachings powerful and beautiful. One other thing we are reminded is that how can we love someone else if we don't first love ourselves? How can we respect others if we don't first respect ourselves? They tell us that the teachings need to first start from within ourselves. The last 7 strands are for the 7 generations in front of us, our children, our grandchildren, and those children yet to be born. Why are they important? Everything we do to Mother Earth will one day affect them. Right now, the Earth gives us everything and anything we possibly want to have for life we have. But if we don't look after her, what's going to be left when it's their turn? The circle that's around me today is that same circle I have to pass on to them. Especially if my circle involves alcohol abuse, drug abuse, family violence, lying, stealing, cheating. Sometimes it's up to us to break that cycle and hopefully replace it with something better. We put all those 3 braids together and they represent yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Mind, body, and spirit, man, woman, and child, man, woman, and creator. When my son was born, I made him a promise that I wouldn't cut his hair until he was 7 years old. We cut it 8 years ago. He was 15 today. But when he was 4 years old, he already knew the teachings, because every morning as I'd get him ready for daycare, I'd braid his hair. I'd ask him, Misko, what does your braid represent? Sweetgrass, he'd say. What does sweetgrass represent, my boy? I'd ask. Kindness, he'd say. What does each of your braids represent, my boy? My mind, my body, my spirit, he'd reply. Okay, what are you going to do today at daycare, my boy? I'd ask. Dad, I'm going to be kind to my mind, my body, my spirit, he'd say. Awesome, my boy. What's going to happen if you do that today? I'd ask. He'd say, Dad, I'm going to be strong. You see, that's the second teaching that comes with the medicine. It's through our kindness that we are most strong. Anybody can raise their fist at anyone. Anyone can use their words to hurt or put someone down. But when we have someone in our face trying to hurt us with their actions or words, we still love, respect, and show that kindness. That takes a lot of strength. Those individual blades of sweetgrass are fragile and are gathered, braided, and those braids are braided, and then there's strength. To become strong, those generations of the past, those generations of the future, with the 7 teachings, must be braided together for that strength. The leaders I'll be introducing today are all fine examples of the sweetgrass story I described. They all carry the 7 teachings with them every day. They honor the past and prepare for the future. And when they are braided together, like you will see here, it is incredible strength. Chief Executive Melanie Benjamin of the Mille Lacs Bands of Ojibwe. Melanie was first elected to the 4-year term of Chief Executive of the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe in 2000 and was re-elected in 2004, 2008, 2012, 2016, and 2020. Benjamin previously served as the band's Commissioner of Administration and Senior Vice President, Administration and Finance at the Grand Casino in Hinckley. Benjamin currently serves as a board member of the Native American Finance Officers Association, Women Empowering Women for Indigenous Nations, the Interior Department Progress Act Negotiated
I
Rule
understand why they have all this
Making Committee,
production, but they're not doing a frickin' thing out here.
American Indian Law Resource Center, National Indian Gaming Association, Midwest Alliance for Sovereign Tribes, Minnesota Board of Aging, Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, and U.S. Attorney General's Tribal Nations Leadership Council. Benjamin holds a master's degree in education and a bachelor's in business administration. Chief Executive, Benjamin.
Bonjour, Anina Anishinaabe Duk. Mino Gijigat Mandaman. Good morning from the Mille Lacs Reservation. Miigwech to the Bureau of Indian Affairs and staff, as well as our tribal staff, who have worked so hard to bring the 2022 Partners in Action Conference to our virtual audience. It is an honor for the Mille Lacs Band to co-sponsor this year's conference. As we begin this important conference, I want to take a few minutes to share my perspective about how we relate and engage with one another as sovereigns. There are two fundamental principles when it comes to our relationship with the federal government and each other. The first is that each of us are sovereign, self-governing nations. As sovereign,
Chief Benjamin, I think we've lost your volume.
okay, are we on now? Do I start over, or what would you like me to do?
I think you can just back up a little bit and continue. You're back on now.
Okay,
Thank
thank you. Yeah, that's kind of tough. I want to say
Or you could
good
start
morning.
over.
Oh, okay. Vuju Anina Anishinaabe Duk, Mino Gijigad Nungum, Mandaman Indigenous Cause, Melanie Benjamin Indigo. Good morning from the Mille Lacs Reservation. Miigwech to the Bureau of Indian Affairs and staff, as well as our tribal staff who have worked so hard to bring the 2022 Partners in Action Conference to a virtual audience. It is an honor for the Mille Lacs Band to co-sponsor this year's conference. As we begin this important conference, I want to take a few minutes to share my perspective about how we relate and engage with one another as sovereigns. There are two fundamental principles when it comes to our relationship with the federal government and each other. The first is that each of us are sovereign, self-governing nations. As separate sovereigns, we each make decisions based on what is best for our tribal membership, and we respect the decisions of other tribes to do the same. The Minnesota Chippewa tribe is comprised of 6 bands. We share a constitution, and we come together to make decisions about enrollment, management of shared MCT lands, and elections. But except for those functions, each of us are separate, sovereign, and self-governing. We each made our own treaties with the United States. We have our own self-governance compacts, and we have our own gaming compacts. We unite on many issues, but we differ on others. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, we are all trying to achieve Bimadiziwan, the good life for our tribal members. In relationship to one another, it is important to acknowledge and respect that each band and tribe here today is inherently sovereign and self-governing. The other relationship that is in the room is our federal trustee. The trust responsibility that flows from every federal government has to be exercised and enforced by every federal agency, not just the BIA. Whether it's Interior, Health and Human Services, HUD, any other federal department, it cannot be emphasized enough that the U.S. is the trustee for our land, resources, our people, and our water. I want to talk about something that I think as tribes we all need to be built strong about, and that is making sure that the other federal departments understand this. Today, less than a mile and a half from the Mille Lacs Band lands, a mining company is attempting to build a copper nickel mine. The mining company already struck a deal with Telsa, owned by Elon Musk, to sell him that nickel. We have grave concerns about our drinking water and our resources, but we are also up against a multinational mining conglomerate and the world's richest man. There is now national and international pressure to get the nickel out of the ground as soon as possible. We are all aware that the world needs batteries for cell phones and electric cars. However, to date, nobody has successfully done this type of mining without severely impacting the water around it. Other tribes in Michigan and Wisconsin know about these types of projects. In our case, these waters that are threatened include Mississippi watershed. This means that it will not only impact us, but along the towns, along the river, the Twin Cities, and other tribes to the south. We are extremely concerned about this proposed sulfide mine and the danger of the acid mine drainage. An interesting thing happened a few months ago. This mining company called Talon Metals got a grant from the Department of Energy to study how it could capture carbon and clean the environment. Senior DOE officials were meeting with this mining company on our land, staying at one of our hotels, but had not contacted us. So we did our own meeting while they were on the property. When we spoke about the federal trust responsibility, this DOE official said, yes, of course, it is very important that we trust each other. We should always trust each other. He knew nothing about the trust responsibility, yet he was working with the mining company on a project just 1.3 miles from our lands. A few weeks ago, I met with DOE Secretary Granholm and discussed the failure of DOE to fully understand the trust responsibility. We believe Secretary Granholm understands, but it is very concerning that senior level officials did not. This is just our example. I'm sure other tribes here today have their own. The BIA and the Department of Interior are the experts on trust responsibility. We have an outstanding Secretary of Interior, Solicitor, and Assistant Secretary who have talented staff who know the trust responsibility flows through all departments and agencies. And miigwech to Assistant Secretary Brian Newland for being here today and for his strong advocacy regarding the BIA's duties as trustee. It is my belief, if there is not already, there should be a system in place where all staff from other federal departments and agencies are required to become trained in their duty to carry out the trust responsibility towards sovereign nations. I understand that would be a huge educational effort, but it has to be done because our future is at stake. Perhaps our closest federal partners at Interior can help us to push for that to happen. I want to leave you all with that thought today. We are each self-governing sovereign nations, but one thing we all have in common is the federal trust responsibility that flows from the United States to our tribes. That responsibility expands far beyond our allies in the BIA. This is going to be a wonderful conference because it always is. I am hoping that one day other federal departments and agencies can follow this model and hold similar conferences as partners in actions with tribes. Miigwech to all the tribes in attendance and to the BIA. I hope we all have a great conference. Miigwech.
Thank you, Chief Executive Benjamin. We do have a slight adjustment in our schedule today. The secretary will be joining us right after our next speaker. So President Shannon Holsey for the Stockbridge-Munsee Band of Mohican Indians. Shannon Holsey serves as the president of Stockbridge-Munsee Band of Mohican Indians. The Stockbridge-Munsee Band of Mohican Indians is located in north central Wisconsin in Shawano County. Holsey is serving her 4th term as president, following 8 years as a member of the Tribal Council. Holsey grew up on the Stockbridge-Munsee Reservation in Bowler, Wisconsin, and is committed to the tribe serving as a good steward of its economic, environmental, and cultural as well as intellectual resources. Holsey also serves as president of the Great Lakes Intertribal Council, which represents 11 members, Wisconsin tribes with a land base of about 1 million acres spanning 45 counties. She is also appointed as the Wisconsin State Legislature's Special Committee on State Tribal Relations, NCAI Treasurer, MAST Secretary, IMED Advisory Council, CMA Tribal Technical Advisory Group, NCAI Subcommittee Member of Land Management, Co-Chair of NCAI Violence Against Women Act Task Force, Wisconsin's MMIW Task Force, Governor appointed Student Debt Relief Task Force, National Council on Aging Committee member, Region 5 EPA RTOC member. Holsey's personal philosophy on leadership recognized that Native Americans are growing economies, preparing students to succeed, delivering high quality health care, protecting the environment, upholding tribal sovereignty, and solving the unique challenges facing our tribal communities. Holsey received her bachelor's degree in business administration, magna cum laude, and master's degree in strategic leadership and communication from Seton Hall University with distinction. President Holsey.
Thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here. Kolamasi, good morning. I'm happy to be here with you today and join you in the 2020 Partners in Action. I really see this as an opportunity to, as you heard Chief Executive Benjamin talk about, and remember our unique relationship with Indigenous people and tribal nations, and really to gather and to share common thoughts and to take this opportunity to join forces in making positive change, to build and to strengthen partnerships, and most importantly, to establish new skills and ideas that can be used every day within our respective agencies and our tribal nation. The theme is Together Towards Tomorrow. And tribal nations are really focused on good stewardship of the land, whether through natural resource management or agricultural production, or especially protections of our sacred sites. Our Indigenous nations are of the original caretakers of all the beautiful lands across our nation and America's first food producers. Indigenous peoples have been cultivating the land within sustainable food systems to feed others since time immemorial. Modern agricultural science around the world is often built on centuries of careful indigenous observation and experimentation. The traditional ecological knowledge is that at the heart of sustainable agriculture, environmentally sound fire management, and good land stewardship practices. Today, I hope we take this opportunity to not only reflect on our tribal trust and treaty responsibility, as Chief Executive has so poignantly expounded on, it also focuses on our priorities for serving Indian country and our tribal communities by striving to continue to meet our obligations and reflect from the areas of removing the unique barriers for Indigenous and tribal access to programs and services, to looking at ways to promoting tribal self-determination throughout, and of course, adapting programs to include tribal values and Indigenous perspectives. As was said earlier, our tribal sovereignty is the inherent authority of tribal lands to self-govern themselves. It is our inherent right of self-rule. This authority is both pre-constitutional and extra-constitutional, meaning that while the United States' own Constitution does memorialize tribal sovereignty, it does not create it. As is well settled, the source of Indian tribes' power is the tribes' people. As co-equal domestic sovereigns, we have a federal trust and treaty-based relationship with the United States. As you can see from the many tribal members here today, American Indians are not a people of the past. It is easy to relegate natives as irrelevant past tense peoples, and it can be hard for people who aren't connected with Native communities to understand what it means to be Native in a contemporary role. Today, however, Native identity is shaped by many complex social, political, historical, and cultural factors. Those that do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. History, with all its glory and ugliness, gives us the opportunity to learn from the past mistakes. It also helps us understand the many reasons why people may behave the way that they do. And as a result, it helps us become more compassionate as people and more impartial as decision makers. When we invest in the things we share, our whole community grows stronger. We have a strong connection with our ancestors. Our ancestral connections are a major source of our resiliency. These connections are simply not an identification of our ancestors, or the discovery of some surface level similarity we have with them. This connection is one born of actual communication, of respect, and of honor. Ancestral knowledge is born of these connections, and that ancestral knowledge makes up a large part of our culture, of our traditional practices and customs, and as of our identity as Indigenous people and as members of our tribal nations. Our ancestral ways of living and being are healing for us, just as they are healing for the land and for our non-human kinship. In this way, ancestral connection emerges, as it always does, as an important consideration in everything we do as Indigenous communities. One of these key tenets to removing those barriers is listening to tribes. We take our tribal consultation responsibility very seriously and work deliberately to engage our federal agency partners throughout decision-making processes and opportunities like Partners in Action today. And of course, decades of experience have proven time and time again that tribes know best how to serve the individual needs of our nations. Tribal leaders like Chief Executive Benjamin and others are key voices in these initiatives to protect and to sustain tribal lands, waters, and natural resources, and are an integral part to food tribal systems, and to design, promote, and to promote economic and infrastructure development within our tribal lands. And we know that these policies, when tribal leaders become to be the key voices of those initiatives, are able to support self-determination. And it marries with the idea of not only honoring your trust and treaty responsibility, we know that they work. That is why we are here today, and we are more committed than ever to strengthen the support of our tribal self-determination and implementing federal programs. Secretary Haaland recognized that an all-government approach is necessary to strengthen and rebuild the bond within Native communities that past federal Indian policies, and specifically Indian boarding school policies, set to break us as Indigenous people. Each employee, as well as each BIA employee, as well as each tribal nation, have an obligation to learn about our trust and treaty responsibility through the lens of historical overview of the federal trust relationship and the trust responsibility, as well as tribal sovereignty and tribal consultation, coordination, and collaboration. And it presents an opportunity for us to reorient federal policies to support and revitalize our tribal languages and culture practices, and to counteract nearly 2 centuries of federal policy aimed at that destruction. It is absolutely a pivotal opportunity for our trustee in speaking with tribal leaders directly about our needs, our challenges, and opportunities to partner with us. And through these types of opportunities, we look forward to sharing more about our tribal nations' meaningful work and the services for our tribal communities. The tribal nations here today represent the resilience of our ancestors. We are the seeds that descended from those who survived forced removals, genocide, termination, and assimilation. Generation after generation, Indigenous people have tenaciously hung on to defend our language, lands, cultures, and our people with resilience and determination. Once thought of remnants of the human past that disappeared in the fog of history, Indigenous peoples and their ancient wisdom are more relevant than ever. So today, it is so important to reaffirm that in spite of the many determined efforts to distinguish our people, we are still here. And not only that, but the new generation of young people are now emerging as political actors in global, regional, and local debates, and will precede us in building a better tomorrow for generations to come. And against all odds, we are still here. But to honor our ancestors' sacrifice, we must never forget that our actions today will impact those that precede. Unlike what has been depicted in history books and media, tribes are not monolithic. Tribes are diverse and unique. And someday we will be the ancestors of our descendants for whom we continue to push, to grow, to thrive, and to continue to nourish and educate the world. Anishik.
Thank you, President Holsey. Now, we were going to go into our regional director, but we're stepping ahead to get the assistant secretary in here. Should be logging on as we speak.
I'm here, Scott.
Outstanding, Brian. Brian Newland, Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs, Department of Interior. Brian is an enrolled member of the Bay Mills Indian Community, a federally recognized Ojibwe tribe in Michigan. Is the 14th Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs. He was confirmed by the United States Senate in August 7th, 2021, and officially sworn into office on August 25th, 21. A ceremonial swearing in by Interior Secretary Deb Haaland was held on September 8th, 21. The Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs assists the Secretary of the Interior in fulfilling the department's trust responsibility to American Indians and Alaskan Native tribes and individuals. The post was established in the late 1970s under the authority contained in 43 U.S.C. 145. Prior to his current appointment, Mr. Newland has served as the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs since March 29, 21. He joined the department in February 21 as Senior Advisor to the Secretary after having served as President of the Bay Mills Indian Community since 2017. From 2009 to 2012, he served as Counselor and Senior Policy Advisor to the Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs, Larry Echohawk. He was acknowledged by Assisting Secretary Echohawk as, among other accomplishments, being pivotal in working in the helping expedite and advancing responsible tribal home ownership, HEARTH Act, as a major piece of legislation that advances tribal self-determination and sovereignty over tribal lands. After leaving federal service in 2012, Mr. Newland spent 4 years as Chief Judge of the Bay Mills Indian Community Tribal Court. Mr. Newland raised was raised on the Bay Mills Indian Community Reservation and graduated from Brimley High School in 1999. He matriculated at Michigan State University, where he went on to become the first graduate at MSU College of Law Indian Law Program in 2007. After several years working at one of Michigan's largest law firms, he joins the Obama administration in 2009. In 2011, he was among that year's recipients of the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development's Native American 40 Under 40 Award. In addition to spending time with his family, he enjoys hiking, kayaking along the shores of Lake Superior, as well as being a nature photography enthusiast. Assistant Secretary Nguyen.
Miigwech, thank you so much, Scott. And I want to say ani buju to everybody joining us today for Partners in Action. I always love this event. When I worked here at the department before as tribal leader, and now again in my current role. I know I have a lot of friends and relatives in attendance here today, and I'm so glad to be with you all. I want to start today by complimenting all of you joining from different tribes across the Midwest region, but also our BI Midwest Regional Office staff. You know, during the pandemic, especially in the early days, it was really difficult serving as a tribal leader. Oftentimes it felt like we were thrust into this difficult and frankly frightening situation on our own without a lot of help. And I know Tammy and the Midwest Regional team convened regular check-ins with all the Midwest region tribes, with IHS and other federal agencies to help us kind of better understand the resources that were available. And I found those sessions as when I was tribal chairman to be enormously beneficial. First, to hear from my colleagues at other tribes and to hear the challenges you were dealing with, and also learn from you about effective response, and also to be able to be plugged in with other federal agencies through the work of our Midwest Regional Office team was enormously beneficial, also to help get resources coordinated in our community. And I know that many folks here lost loved ones, you know, during the pandemic. But I don't want to minimize that. I also though want to acknowledge that the work that everybody here did together during that time in partnership with the BIA Midwest Regional Office, that work saved lives. Your work saved lives of people you know, people in your communities. And it was really through the partnership that we all formed together in that effort. And it was also helpful for me as a tribal leader to be on those calls and to know that we weren't alone in the challenges we faced and the struggle we faced. So I want to thank each and every one of you for the work that you've done these past few years, for teaching me and supporting me, supporting one another. And I want to thank our Midwest region staff at the BIA. I know that together our work saved lives and made people's lives better. And I will forever be grateful for that. In this job, you know, I've had I really enjoyed being tribal chairman at Bay Mills Indian Community. And, you know, it was a very rewarding experience in living at home with my family along Lake Superior, the big lake. As you all just heard, is something that, you know, I just absolutely love. My life, notwithstanding the pandemic, my life was really good. But I was offered the opportunity to come and serve in this role. And I always knew it was going to take a lot to pry me away from home in serving my community and my people. But the opportunity to work under President Biden and Secretary Holland was one that I just couldn't pass up, because I saw the commitment to Indian country, real meaningful commitment beyond lip service. And I wanted to be a part of it, and I wanted to work alongside all of you in this role. And, we've been really busy over the last 18 months in our work here to try to make a difference in the lives of people in tribal communities across the country. I've had the opportunity to travel to many different communities across Indian country since taking this job. I've heard loud and clear that tribal leaders want us to do better and be better partners when it comes to public safety in Indian country. Secretary Holland has asked us to prioritize missing and murdered Indigenous women, missing and murdered Indigenous people. That's why one of her first actions as secretary was to establish the missing and murdered unit within the BIA. And we've also been working to make investments in our law enforcement funding. In traveling across Indian country, have also heard about the need to make investments in infrastructure at the community level. We know that Indian country has always lagged behind when it comes to funding for basics, drinking water, wastewater, roads. And, we're taking a lot of steps to make those investments under President Biden's leadership. Have heard from tribal leaders about the need to protect tribal homelands, protect treaty resources, subsistence resources. Have heard and seen how climate change is jeopardizing those things, how climate change is affecting ecosystems that threaten our ability to exercise off-reservation treaty rights, how it's affecting subsistence rights, water rights, traditional foods, everything. And we know that we've got to do something about climate change, and that it relates, all of the stuff relates to itself. And, that's one of the things that we are keeping in mind as we go about our work. And in serving as assistant secretary, I actually didn't know this until I was confirmed, as I'm only the second person to serve in this job who had previous experience as an elected tribal leader. And we've got a lot of folks here in our team who have worked for their tribal communities or worked on the ground in other tribal communities, including in the Midwest. And that perspective has really helped us keep the focus on making the connection between our policy work and what actually happens in your communities. And I know we've got a lot of folks on this call or this meeting at the staff level from many different tribes. And our experience of having worked on the ground in tribal communities and for tribal governments has really made sure that we understand that the stuff that we do here in Washington, D.C. has to be usable and beneficial for the folks in the tribal governments and at the community level who are doing this work. And that's a perspective we bring with us every day. I'm always grateful for the people who serve their communities in tribal government. I know that a lot of times it seems like an impossible task. You're taking $5, some duct tape and some chicken wire and making the whole thing go, and wearing multiple hats. And you're at the front of our mind when we're doing our work. President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law has made investments of more than $13 billion directly in tribal communities across the country. And here within the Bureau of Indian Affairs, that includes $466 million that we're investing directly in tribal communities under President Biden's leadership. So this has included things like drinking water, ecosystem restoration, climate resilience and relocation. And we're coordinating with our colleagues across the federal government to make sure that the Bureau of Indian Affairs is not a barrier to putting these funds to use in your communities. So that includes things like speeding up the right-of-way process for water lines that are being constructed with IHS dollars. speeding up the right-of-way process for broadband and communications that are being funded under the infrastructure law through the Department of Commerce. And we want to make sure that at the end of the day, this money reaches tribal communities and is put to use to benefit people on the ground in tribal communities. And we want to be partners with those of you who are working for tribal governments and making that happen. One of the biggest priorities that we have, after infrastructure and public safety, is making sure that we are fulfilling our trust obligation to protect and restore tribal homelands through the administration's Tribal Homelands Initiative. This is a collaborative effort to restore tribal ownership of lands, put land into trust, but also to strengthen the relationship between federal agencies and tribal governments for the management and stewardship of lands outside of existing reservations, be they National Park Service lands, Fish and Wildlife Service lands, National Forest lands. We want to make sure that we are promoting those partnerships for co-stewardship and co-management, because we know that the accumulation and the body of tribal knowledge when it comes to land stewardship will benefit the American people, will also benefit the world as we look to conserve lands and respond to climate change. Tribes are the oldest and, quite honestly, the best land managers on this continent. And this is not something that we're doing as a federal government just to, do something for tribes. This is something where tribes are bringing a lot to the table that will benefit the country and the world. And so we want to promote that. That's why last November, Secretary Haaland and USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack signed a joint secretarial order directing our federal agencies to engage with you in co-stewardship and co-management agreements on lands that are managed by the Forest Service and BLM and Park Service and Fish and Wildlife Service and other agencies at our departments. And we also want to make sure, as we're doing that, all of our decisions relating to stewardship of lands and waters and wildlife include how we are going to fulfill our responsibility to protect treaty resources, places of spiritual practice, ceremonies, sacred places, how we're going to protect subsistence rights and other cultural interests of tribes. And so those are steps that we're taking under the Homelands initiatives. We're also working to make sure that we are putting in place regulatory changes that will improve our ability to fulfill our trust responsibility. And regulations are one of the best tools that we have to make sure that our policy choices outlast our tenure in office. So some of the examples of some of the things that we've done there is to reform our Buy Indian Act regulations. The federal government is the largest purchaser of goods and services in the country. Federal contracting is an enormous opportunity for small businesses, and the Buy Indian Act it requires us to make sure that we are promoting Indian-owned businesses in that effort. And so we've made changes to our Buy Indian Act regulations that we believe will open up tens of millions of dollars in new economic opportunities for Indian-owned businesses in your communities. We're also making changes to our Gaming Compact regulations that will help better draw the boundaries between tribal sovereignty and states' interests when it comes to the regulation of Class 3 gaming and protecting that sphere of tribal sovereignty so that gaming compacts aren't used as a tool to expand state jurisdiction and state and local control over Indian country. And we are also undertaking an effort to reform our land and the trust regulations. In 1934, Congress passed the Indian Reorganization Act, which directed the Secretary of the Interior to put land into trust. And for almost 50 years, the department carried out that function, that statutory directive, without any regulations. But over time, as many of you know, we have made it progressively harder for us to put land in the trust for tribes. Every time the department has done regulations on land in the trust, it's raised the bar for how much tribes have to do before we put land in a trust. We have glommed on a whole bunch of other bureaucratic requirements onto those regulations. And now that has led us to this place where in many times it takes several years for us to make a decision on a land in a trust application. And so for the first time since the passage of the Indian Reorganization Act, we are actually working to make it easier to put land in the trust. And that was a commitment President Biden made during his campaign, was to make this process simpler and easier for tribes. And so one of the things that we're doing is putting it right in our regulations that it is the Department of the Interior's policy that every federally recognized tribe should have a protected homelands if it wants it. And that means land in the trust. We are also putting in place criteria for when we will consider a tribe to be under federal jurisdiction, which is one of the things that came out of the Carcieri case. And that has been a big choke point in this process, requiring a long legal review. Our BIA team under Daryl LeCount's leadership and other folks in our realty division at BIA have also worked to speed up some of the back of house things as well, so that it doesn't take so long and isn't so expensive for us to put land in the trust. And this is one of the things that we are committed to in this administration, is to getting these regulations changed, to getting this process fixed, so that tribes can have the ability to put land in the trust, to have a protected homelands, so that we can continue our way of life as tribal people. That is part of our trust responsibility as the United States, is to make sure that we are empowering tribes to continue the tribal way of life. And inherent in that tribal way of life is our ability to live together on our homelands. And we're going to fight for that, and we're going to make sure that we get it done. And I want to wrap up and conclude today to talk a little bit just about the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative. As you all know, we released the first volume of our investigative report in May, which included a list of 408 federal Indian boarding schools that operated across the country over a century and a half, and laid out the scope of this policy era. That a lot of that information was not news to Indian country, but was news to the world. And for the first time, the United States federal government has put out a statement accounting for, somewhat accounting for this policy in this era. And that's why we're going to continue that work to build out our understanding of each of those 408 schools, to get a better picture of how many cemeteries and burial sites there are across the system, to better understand the total cost. How much money did the United States put into this system of eradicating our cultures, eradicating tribal languages, and get a good sense of a complete picture of the scope of this policy. As part of this work, though, we know that we are resurfacing a lot of trauma for people who went to boarding schools and their families, and people across communities. And that many people want to come forward and share their stories and their experiences, or your family's experiences, with the world. And Secretary Haaland has begun a year-long Road to Healing tour, where we are going to visit places across the country to hear directly from people who attended these boarding schools and their families, and put those stories on the record for the nation. And as we do that, we're going to make sure that we are working directly with tribes and our partners at Department of Health and Human Services to provide on-site mental health services, as well as connecting people with follow-up care, because again, we know this is very painful and traumatizing for people. Last weekend, Secretary Holland and I were at the Riverside Indian School in Anadarko, Oklahoma, where for nearly 6 hours, we sat in the gymnasium and heard directly from people who went to these boarding schools and heard their stories, and also their family members and tribal leaders about how these boarding schools have directly impacted them and their communities. Our work is going to continue. We've announced at least 5 sites or locations where we will conduct these visits, and Secretary Holland and I will each host a number of other sites that have not been publicly announced yet. And I'm really looking forward. This has been a very difficult time for us and challenging and taxing emotionally, but I also look forward to it because we know that this is a necessary step to healing from this policy era. So as you can see, we've been really busy. Our team here has been burning the candle at both ends, so to speak. But we know that we've got to deliver from Indian country. And we know that because the president has committed to that and the secretary has committed to that. But also we've lived this. All of us on our team are invested in working with you to get all of this stuff done and to see it through because it affects us. We all grew up with it. We all know it. And we know that we've got a trust obligation to make life better for Indian people in tribal communities. And to do that, we've got to partner with many of you in tribal governments and tribal leaders. And I really enjoy that work. It's the best, most exciting part about this job. And partnering with all of you is really invigorating. It lifts my spirits, and it makes it easy to get up and come to work every day to serve Indian country and to serve the country. And I enjoy that collaboration. So I want to say miigwech to all of you for your service, for your partnership, and for taking time with us today.
Miigwech, Assistant Secretary Newland, thank you very much for taking the time. As you'll soon see, we have some positions that are being filled with leaders acting on their behalf. We can plan for everything, but we can only control what's in our path. There are moments that our leaders may be in time of need, and that is when our acting leaders take that sweetgrass strength, step up and help carry the load that's on their shoulders. So there'll be a few leadership here. I'll read their bios and then we'll have their acting leadership step in and speak for them. Tammy Poitra, Regional Director. Tammy is an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Tribe of North Dakota. Tammy began her federal career in November 1983. Currently serves as the Regional Director for the Midwest region. She has held this position since June of 2019. Prior to this position, Tammy held the position of Deputy Regional Director. Tammy ensured the smooth and efficient operation of the regional offices and 3 agencies. She works with the Bureau's senior leadership and staff and other departmental offices to achieve the Assistant Secretary's objectives, participates in senior management discussions on a wide variety of matters, including ethics, personnel, and departmental operations. Filling in for Tammy is the Acting Regional Director, Chris Redmond.
Thanks, Scott. And I appreciate the words this morning from the Assistant Secretary Newland. Yeah, hello, my name is Chris Redmond. I'm an enrolled member of the Chickasaw Nation of Oklahoma and the Deputy Director for Indian Services for Midwest Region. Currently, I'm also the Acting Director of Midwest BIA, as Scott said. Today, I had the distinct honor of helping kick off our conference and to welcome you on behalf of the Regional Director, Tammy Poitra, Deputy Director of Trust, Patty Olby, and all of the Midwest Region employees. So welcome to Partners in Action. The theme for this year's conference, Together Towards Tomorrow, reflects on the work that we do together to strengthen Indian country. Building on our government-to-government relationship has been one of the key focuses, or the key focus areas for our past 12 years of this conference, and we're committed to continued collaboration with tribal leaders throughout the Midwest region. I want to extend my appreciation to this year's tribal hosts, Mille Lacs Band of Chippewa Indians Chief Executive Benjamin and Stockbridge Muncie President Holsey. I also want to thank the Assistant Secretary of the Indian Affairs for his continued support in Partners in Action. Secretary Newland has attended each conference in many capacities over the past 12 years, as he stated. I extend my appreciation to Director of BIA, Mr. Darrell Account, Deputy Directors, and numerous Central Office BIA Program Managers for your continued support. I especially want to thank the conference planning team and all of those who have and will make this conference a success. As we continue to focus on strengthening the sovereignty of tribal nations, building strong government-to-government relationships, we honor the tribal leaders and past leaders for their commitment to their people, restoration to their tribal homelands, and building economic development in their communities. I also want to thank the Midwest tribes that have firmly established and support this event as a top regional event, fostering long-lasting partnerships. While we continue to hold the Partners in Action Conference virtually this year, our hope is to see all of you next year in a more hybrid conference. So I hope you enjoy the conference and find the new possibilities that may influence your life, community, and tribes. Thank you and enjoy the conference. Back to you, Scott.
Thank you, Chris, for acting regional director. Next, I'm going to introduce the executive team, starting out with our deputies or who's acting in their term. Patty Olby, Deputy Regional Director of Trust Services. Patty is an enrolled member of the Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians. Patty began her career in 1992, immediately after graduating with high honors from Wisconsin Indian Technical College, earning her associate's degree in accounting. Patty has served as the Midwest region for the past 28 years in several positions, including IT specialist, realty officer, superintendent of the Minnesota agency, and currently the regional deputy director of trust services. In her spare time, she enjoys playing piano, singing, theater, crafts, sewing, cooking, and spending time with her family and her two dogs, Reggie and Lucy. Filling in for Patty today is acting Deputy Regional Director of Trust Services, Heidi Gordon.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you all. Good morning and welcome, tribes, nations, and bands, to the 2022 Partners in Action Conference. I spoke with Patty this morning, and unfortunately, as many have you just heard, that she won't be able to make it today to our ceremonies. However, is very much looking forward to attending every session that she is able to. My name is Heidi Gordon, and while Patty is away, I will be the acting Deputy Regional Director for Trust Services. Just a little bit about myself. I am an enrolled member of the Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians, and I have over 30 years of experience within the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I started my career path in 1992, and actually, Patty and I started on the very same day working for Probate Services. I worked with probate and then pretty much all of the sections within the branch of real estate services. And then in 1999, I started with the Indian Land Consolidation Pilot Project program, which ended up becoming a permanent program in 2002 and ended around 2009. In 2015, the Midwest region opened the Land Titles and Records Office, where I am currently the Midwest LTRO manager. On behalf of all the trust service programs, we'd like to welcome everyone as we look forward to working with all of you as we work together towards tomorrow. Thank you. Scott?
Thank you, Heidi. Appreciate your comments.
You're welcome.
Next, we have Chris Redmond, who acting on his behalf will be Todd Kennedy. Chris's bio began his professional career in a behavioral health field as a child care specialist, juvenile case manager, home-based therapist, and held supervisory roles in vocational rehabilitation. He served the Chickasaw Nation between 1998 and 2005 in numerous roles, including manager of the Vocational Rehabilitation and Chemical Dependency Program, special assistant to Lieutenant Governor Jeffrey Keel, director of Carter Seminary, a peripheral dormitory in Ardmore, now Chickasaw Children Village in Kingston, Oklahoma, and administrator over the tribe's Division of Education. In 2005, Chris accepted the position of Education Planning Specialist at the Washington, D.C. Department of Interior Central Office with the Bureau of Indian Education. In 2007, Chris was reassigned as the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Anadarko, Oklahoma, to a recruitment analysis position in HR. He returned to BIE and promoted to Education Program Manager in 2008. With BIE, Chris administered federal grants, contracts to tribally controlled colleges and university. Chris was elected and served as the 6th president of Haskell Indian Nations University from 2011 to 2013 until he served as the Chickasaw Nation and appointed by Governor Anatabi as executive officer of self-determination. His role placed him over tribal self-governance, light horse police, tribal policy, tribal citizenship from 2013 to 2015. At the conclusion of his appointment, Chris maintained other public service roles with the Oklahoma Department of Human Services, Division of Aging, and with the City of Tulsa Housing Authority. Chris returned to a federal service in 2017 to the BIA Eastern Region as superintendent for the Seminole Agency in Hollywood, Florida. And in 2021, was selected for his current role as the Deputy Regional Director of Indian Services at the Midwest region. Chris received his bachelor's degree in business administration from Oral Roberts University and 2 master's degrees, one in human relations and another later in higher education administration at the University of Oklahoma and the University of Kansas, respectively. Chris has a son, twin daughters, a stepson, stepdaughter, and 9 grandchildren. Chris is a native of Oklahoma and a member of the Uncorrigible Chickasaw Nation of Oklahoma. Filling in for Chris today is Acting Deputy Regional Director of Indian Services, Todd Kennedy. Todd?
Hello, everyone. As Scott mentioned, I'm Todd Kennedy. I'm the Regional Road Engineer for the Midwest region. I've been with the Bureau for 27 years, all within the Midwest region, all within the branch of roads, and for the past 22 years as the Regional Road Engineer. However, today it's my honor to welcome everybody to the Midwest region's 2022 Partners in Action Conference as the Acting Deputy Regional Director for Indian Services. There's going to be a ton of information that'll be shared over the next few weeks, and we're all excited to do our part, and we look forward to having discussions with many of you. So on behalf of the Indian Services programs, welcome, and we hope everybody has a great day. Back to you, Scott.
Outstanding. Thank you, Todd. The next slide, I'm going to introduce the superintendents, and they will be speaking their kind words at the closing ceremony. So, Acting Minnesota Agency Superintendent Robert Lentelman. Bob received a Bachelor's of Science degree in Forestry Administration from the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point in 1984. Upon graduation, he took a position as an inventory forester with Ed Steigerwald Consulting Foresters Incorporated. In 1986, Bob accepted a position in the Menominee Tribal Enterprise as a project forester and timber sales forester. And in 1990, Bob began his federal career and accepted a position as timber sales forester with the Bureau of Indian Affairs on the Red Lake Indian Reservation. In 1997, The BIA forestry program was compacted by the tribe under self-governance, and the tribe offered Bob the position of forestry program director, which he held until 2005, when he accepted his current position within the Bureau of Indian Affairs at the Minnesota Agency Forester. Bob has served as acting agency superintendent periodically in the superintendent's absence, and he is currently assisting the deputy directors with the superintendent's responsibilities until the vacancy is filled. Next, we have Jason Oberly, Michigan Agency Superintendent. Jason was selected to be the superintendent of the Michigan Agency in March of 2014. Prior, he served as a community planner in the Transportation Division of the Tribal Transportation Program, formerly the Indian Reservation Roads Program, in the Northwest region in Portland, Oregon. Before working with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Jason worked as an executive in local government in the states of Michigan and Indiana. Also, Jason has a bachelor's degree from the Lake Superior State University and a master's degree from Indiana University O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs, with majors in public financial administration and public policy analysis. Jason is a member of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. And the last, the Great Lakes Agency Superintendent, Diane Baker. Diane is an enrolled member of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians, holds a Bachelor of Science in Management and Leadership. Diane began her federal service in his temporary GS3 position with Great Lakes Agency in 1987 and became the superintendent of the agency on March 29, 2020. She brings to the agency experience from numerous positions in various Indian Affairs Trust programs, serving in the Midwest and Southern Pueblo agencies, the Midwest Regional Office, BIA headquarters, and the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs. Diane also worked as a director of the Realty Program for the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe during a 4-year break in federal service. Positions Diane served in include Agency Regional Realty Officer, Deputy Regional Director of Trust Services, Superintendent of the Minnesota and Great Lakes Agency, Special Assistant to Asia, Assistant Deputy Director of Indian Affairs, Trust Services. Diane also worked with the National FIDA Trust Initiative from 2008 to 2019 and is responsible for setting up the Midwest Regional Division of FIDA Trust, initially the FIDA Trust Consortium, serving as program manager for almost 10 years. She also served on the development team for the Department of Interior's land buyback program, which included the TAMS acquisition process and module, and as team lead for the National A&D Users Group responsible for TAMS, A&D, and FIDA Trust modules. Diane also completed the Integral Pathways program and led the team responsible for standardizing position descriptions that were implemented nationally for real estate services. In 2020, Diane was honored to receive the Distinguished Service Award, the highest honor of the Department of Interior, for her leadership and contribution to improving the Land into Trust land management program for BIA, an area vital to enhancing tribal sovereignty. And you can see our keynote addresses, and to accommodate Assistant Secretary Newland's schedule, we already got him done. So we'll move on to the next here. Director, Bureau of Indian Affairs. Daryl LeCount, a member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians in North Dakota, is the director of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, an agency within the U.S. Department of Interior. LeCount is named the director of the Bureau of Indian Affairs on April 28, 2019, and had served as the acting director of the Bureau of Indian Affairs from April 26, 2018. He began his federal career in 1988 at the Bureau's Wind River Agency in Fort Washakie, Wyoming, as an oil and gas specialist in the Real Estate Services branch of the Office of Trust Services. After having served in several other capacities within the BIA Rocky Mountain region, he was named the regional director for the Rocky Mountain region in March of 2015 and was acting regional director for the Rocky Mountain region from January 2014. He is an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians. Director LeCount.
Hi, Scott. This is Tyler Fish, advisor to Director LeCount. He's having some technical difficulties on his side. He just messaged me. We're going to try and get him online in just a moment.
Okay, perfect. If you would like, I could step ahead, or do you want me to give it a minute?
No, I think you can go ahead and proceed to the next one. I'll get in touch with him for IT support, and we'll get back to you.
Outstanding, thank you. So we're going to move ahead then, and we'll come back to the director. So next in the strength of our Sweetgrass story, we have Deputy Bureau Director, Trust Services, Jonah Blackhair, an enrolled member of the Chippewa Cree tribe in Montana, a Deputy Bureau Director for Trust Services at the Bureau of Indian Affairs headquarters within the Department of Interior in Washington, D.C. As the Deputy Director of Trust Service, she oversees 13 divisions that are responsible for assisting tribal governments and allottees in managing, protecting, developing their trust lands and natural resources, which total 56 million surface acres and 60 million acres of subsurface mineral estates. Trust Services programs aid landowners in the stewardship of their resources, not only to protect their cultural and spiritual and traditional uses, but in optimizing those which tribal government depends on through the revenue and jobs they generate. Ms. Blackhair began her federal career in 1991 in the Land Conservation Office in the Utah and ORA agency in Fort Duchesne, Utah, where she conducted various real estate services functions in addition to serving as the realty officer at the Southwest Region office. Ms. Blackhair has held a number of BIA field leadership positions, including superintendent positions at the Mescalero Agency and the Utah and ORA Agency, Eastern Regional Office, Deputy Regional Director, Eastern Regional Office, Regional Director, Acting Associate Deputy Bureau Director, Trust Services, and in September of 2019 was named Deputy Bureau Director, Trust Services. Prior to her appointment, Ms. Blackhair had served as BIA Trust Services Acting Associate Deputy Bureau Director, Acting Deputy Bureau Director for more recently in January 2021 as Acting Director of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Deputy Director Blackhair.
Miwasan kitse payaw niya neyo kawi tapimat kisimanito. Good morning. I am Chippewa Cree. My Cree name is Sits by the Creator. I'm the Deputy Bureau Director for Trust Services. I deeply appreciate the confidence Director LeCount placed in me to lead BIA Trust Services, whose mission is as basic as the component of the federal trust responsibility to tribes and allottees with trust lands and resources. Hi for the prayers and reminder of our sacred Sweetgrass teachings as we come together in light of our Creator's many blessings. It brought me back to my own youth, braiding sweetgrass and picking sage alongside of my grandparents on both sides of the Canadian border, helping and watching my grandfather cut above the purple, keeping the roots intact for future prayers. Hi to the Midwest region, Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, tribal leaders, veterans, and Red Willow Drum Group for the opening for this conference. I'm humbled and happy to be here with you in this capacity at this time in my 34-year career with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Times have drastically changed for the better. I'm honored to serve Secretary Holland, Assistant Secretary Newland, and Director LeCount. They are passionate about doing what's right with a strong
Dr. Blackhair, it seemed we've.
I
There we go.
Yes, I'm sorry, my connection is poor, I will. What was the last thing you heard me say?
You just went off, Johnny. You can go ahead.
Okay. Hi to the Midwest Region Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe tribal leaders, veterans, and Red Willow Drum Group for opening this conference. I'm humbled and happy to be here in this capacity at this time in my 34 years career with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Times have drastically changed for the better. I'm honored to serve Secretary Holland and Assistant Secretary Newland and Director LeCount. They are passionate about doing what's right with a strong commitment to get to yes, as we work diligently and progressively to serve tribal communities. As I look back at my time with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, it is clear we are not the BIA of our fathers and grandfathers. Over 30 years ago, as a young person entering the workforce, BIA was led by non-Indians in many of our key mission-critical occupations. Over 3 decades, I've seen challenging times and change. The past 30 years have been the largest increase in the number of American Indians and Alaska Native people working for the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Currently, most of its employees are Native American or Alaska Natives, representing the largest number at any time in our history. Over 50% of today's BIA workforce are trust-related mission-critical occupations. In keeping with the authorities and responsibilities granted under the Snyder Act of 1921 and other federal laws and regulations, treaties, BIA employees across the country work with tribal governments in the administration of law enforcement, justice, agriculture and economic development, tribal governance, natural resource management programs in order to enhance the quality of life of tribal communities and management and stewardship of these tribal nations, as we work directly with them and are involved in their community development. The Bureau of Indian Affairs is a rarity among federal agencies. Our roots reach back to the Continental Congress. The BIA is almost as old as the United States itself. We have tribes that have agreements with foreign countries that are now part of the United States that we must also bring forward as we reach into the future. Its role now is as a partner with the tribes to help tribes achieve their goals for self-determination while maintaining its responsibilities under the federal trust and government-to-government relationships. The Bureau of Indian Affairs Office of Trust Services helps and assists field operations, tribal governments, and allottees in managing, protecting, and developing their trust and natural resources, as well as their cultural and traditional resources. Office of Trust Service programs aid owners in the stewardship of their cultural, spiritual, and traditional resources to help tribal governments create sustainable sources of revenue and jobs within their communities. The Office of Trust Services is responsible to provide guidance, policy, and regulatory updates, training, coordinated outreach in the forms of congressional briefs, support to tribal listening sessions, tribal consultations, and reaching cross-government to engage federal offices to honor trust and treaty responsibilities that in this all-of-government approach to strengthen our forces in these unprecedented times. I'm also charged to modernize our system and business processes to align and streamline those processes to support tribal goals and objectives. It is important for me and my office to advance tribal partnerships as we seek to improve our business acumen, coordination, and collaboration in this all-of-government approach to benefit tribal nations. During the 2022 Partnerships in Action Conference, the Office of Trust Services is excited to share and provide updates on these initiatives Assistant Secretary Newland mentioned earlier, and share some additional funding opportunities, including our long-term outlook to carry forward President Biden's initiatives made available through the bipartisan infrastructure law. I am open to any comments, suggestions to better serve field operations and tribal compacted and contracted programs and tribal leaders. Please submit your feedback to ots@bia.gov. Hi, I wish you all the best and continue to do that great work that you all do. Thank you.
Kimmy Deputy Director Blackhair. Now, we're still having some technical issues with Director LeCount, so he won't be joining us today. And as we'd have it. Same thing is happening with Mr. Stevens, Deputy Director of Field Operations. So that happens, and with technology, we've just got to adapt, improvise, and overcome. So next up our list, I get to the right slides now, is the Northeast Regional Solicitor, Field Special Assistant, Tony Sullins. Tony Sullins is the Regional Solicitor for the Department of the Interior and also serves as Secretary Holland's Field Special Assistants for the Great Lakes region. Mr. Sullins is a 30-year employee of the Department of the Interior, and his legal team handles well over 1,000 cases per year on behalf of the Department of Interior. As Regional Solicitor, Tony and his staff take particular pride in providing high-quality, ethical legal representation for the Secretary and for the Midwest region of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Field Special Assistant Sullins or Regional Solicitor Tony Sullins.
Thank you, Scott. Good morning, everyone. It's my honor and privilege to address this meeting of distinguished tribal leaders and leaders from my own Department of the Interior. I looked forward to this conference, particularly this year, because it gives me another chance to share with you how fortunate I feel to serve as Secretary Holland's Field Special Assistant and to work for our great solicitor, Bob Anderson, as Regional Solicitor. My mission and the mission of every one of the attorneys and support staff on my team is to help Secretary Holland, Regional Director Poitras, Acting Regional Director Redmond, and all of BIA find a legal path forward to implement their policy choices and to help them meet their obligations to tribes and tribal members. Over the course of this conference this year, you will hear from 5 of my staff attorneys in the Twin Cities office, at least one of our attorneys from the Solicitor's Division of Indian Affairs in DC, and they will be speaking to you on a variety of very important legal topics. But I want to share a quick word about a special project that Regional Director Tammy Poitras and I have been working on. This year, Regional Director Poitras and her team alone will send me literally hundreds of cases for legal assistance. We are busy, but we are organized. At nearly every meeting I have with the Regional Director, she and I brainstorm about how to continually improve services, and we've decided to implement a pilot program to further streamline and speed our work on fee to trust title issues. Assistant Secretary Newland has spoken eloquently and forcefully on that issue. And as you just heard, this is an administration priority. The Regional Director and I have heard him, and we are leaving no stone unturned to prioritize this important directive. I hope you enjoy speaking with my attorneys in the coming sessions. They work hard, are among the very best in the country at what they do, and I'm sure you will enjoy their presentations. We are honored again to support Regional Director Poitras, Acting Regional Director Redmond, and their staff who have worked to make this another successful Partners in Action conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Regional Solicitor Sullins. Appreciate that. Now, we've completed our agenda for everybody who's speaking today. We had a few technical issues. We'll try to get them in our closing ceremony. We'll get them online for that. A couple administrative notes. Again, we do have facilitators that'll read a script at the beginning of the Partners in Action. And they're there for you to make this an enjoyable event. In the notes or the chat will be the course catalog and the link for registration. I know when the registrations went out, it said we're closed on July 8th for registration. That link is open, and there also is an email address there of Midwest Region PIA@bia.gov. That link also you can email to, but click on the registration if you want to attend a session, register for it, and you can participate. We want to make sure we share as much knowledge and experience as we can. Additionally, this year, based off of the course surveys, when you're done with it, we're going to ask how the Partners in Action event went for you. We want your input. If there's areas of training or sessions you'd like us to hold, please let us know. Last year, one of the tribes had, or one of the leadership that were attending had provided information they wanted a budget 201 training. So it's in the course catalog. Take a look at it. That's going to be a panel. I have the budget 101 course, but there'll be a budget 201 that myself, Michelle Corbine, and we're looking at a couple tribal members or leaders that'll be involved in that panel, and we'll present those questions that were brought forward and have a budget 201. It's basically once the contract is established at the tribes, what to do then. What can we do? What can we modify? Information like that. So, all right. So we do listen to your comments. So we really want you to fill them out and make sure you get those done. The course critiques at the end. And if there's no questions, we are exactly 8 minutes early from our time
Scott, I
allotted.
think there's a question in the box. There's an individual with their hand up.
Okay. Carol. Bear with me here. I don't see a hand in my window.
Linda Cat Chikango.
Oh, Linda? You have a question? Linda Cachinago, if you can unmute yourself. Okay, the course catalog should be, you can see my screen with the participants in here. It'll be entered right into the chat here. And if you roll up, did it this morning before we even started. I entered the PIA session link, so if you need to register, that link's in there. And then right below that is the email, mwrpia@bia.gov. Linda, were you able to get on for a question? I don't have anything. Any other questions? Again, the room facilitators will mute people as it goes along. And make sure you unmute if you have a question and speak, and then we should be good. Enjoy the PIA. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.